This episode is sponsored by The Power of You, a leadership resource for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and anyone intent on developing their leadership impact and supercharging their career. For more information, check the podcast webpage or show notes. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. You know, when I started my company, Avatar Resources, back in 1987, one of the themes, I guess, that kept cropping up, at least initially, was around the name of the company. And I had a couple of folks that were very traditional business people saying, you can't use that kind of a name, Avatar Resources. What are you thinking of? And I'm going, well, the word avatar, Sanskrit word, it means the embodiment of an ideal. I mean, that's essentially what the word means. And the embodiment of an ideal, the embodiment of an idea. So it's idea in physical form. And I've said, I understand that that's not a familiar word, particularly back in 1987, the mid 80s. But I went with it, and it's worked out really well. And I'm mentioning that because a large part of where I come from and the work that I do with my clients and just my writing and everything else has to do with how I define the purpose of business. And the purpose of business is to create the possibility of thriving on the planet. Create the possibility of people feeling, all life forms on the planet being uplifted as a consequence of our activities. So if my product or my service is delivering on that promise, I'm not going to have a problem having customers, because people are going to feel uplifted. And the idea here has to do with impact, impact that's tied to, this founding ideal, this idea that wanted to, be birthed and, be given life. Organizations grow, and as they grow and they scale, they start moving away from that founding kernel. They start wrapping themselves in processes and all kinds of other things that begin to insulate. And I use the word insulate in a very specific way here. It begins to buffer the experience of that life force from actually being able to be accessed by the people in the organization and those that are actually being impacted by the organization. So all of this is a long roundabout sort of a way of saying when we're when we're focusing on the business, we're missing opportunities that are consistent with having the kind of impact we were founded to have. When our focus is on impact, not fiscal impact, not monetary impact, but impact, social impact, the impact on the lives of the people with whom we're interacting. That's where the organization begins to have an opportunity to thrive once again. It was thriving in the beginning, even though it was like rolling a rock up a hill sometimes. But the idea there of energy, the idea of movement, the idea of connection, all come into play here. And I'm belaboring this point here because my guest today, Russell McLeod, is an absolute, and I hesitate to use the word expert here, but I am going to use this word in the domain of social responsibility, social impact, in the domain of connecting to soul, as an enterprise. There are very few people on this planet that do it as well as Russell, write about it as well as Russell, and facilitate the minutia of what it takes to remain connected as well as Russell does. He's a social entrepreneur, a business leader. He's a founder of an organization called Mighty Hum. And Mighty Hum, I love what it says on their website, and it's mightyhum.com. But why work with us? And this is directly off their website. Our specialty lies in unpacking the issues, getting you stuck, and then creating a thriving ecosystem made up of the right systems, people, and rituals to help your business shine, making a difference, having impact, keeping your business humming. And it hums when it's connected to the soul that made it possible to begin with. So, Russell, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Blaine. It's really an honor to be here. And you're so poetic in your words. It's very inspiring.
Well, thank you so much for saying so. Your background, and I was not being overly effusive here, and I wasn't blowing smoke when I was actually describing it. You are just incredibly proficient at maintaining this sort of connection. And I want to just kind of give a little history here, but prior to founding Mighty Hum, you were the executive director, and I'm very familiar with this organization. Very executive director of an organization called Me to We, which was
Yes.
one of Canada's most recognized social enterprises. I mean, you literally delivered over $20 million in cash and in-kind donations to We Charity, which was an arm of Me to We as an organization, and have impacted hundreds of thousands of people around. And I say I'm familiar with it because, I'm on the board of the Unstoppable Foundation, and we were actually, fortunate in many ways to be able to collaborate with We Charities in the delivery of the services that we were providing in Africa. So, with that background, you migrated into founding Mighty Hum. What's the impetus that kind of set you off on this entrepreneurial journey, such that you found your own organization?
Well, that's a great question. So I spent 25 years of my career at the intersection of business and social impact. I love both of those sides. One side is for my soul, which is the part of it that is about making the world a better place and addressing various social issues. But the other side of what I love is the business side of an organization. So I grew up playing competitive sports. What I loved most about competitive sports was learning how to play together as a team.
Yeah.
I think it was my grade 10 year, I played on a basketball team, my high school team. And in our very first tournament, we finished in last place. And it was such a humbling experience. And then throughout the year, learning how to play together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses, understanding how we could construct an offensive system and a defensive system. All of those things led to us at the end of the year finishing first in our region. Uh, so not even our city, our region. And it was this incredible journey. And so my direction of entering into business was that same path of loving the idea of building a team and learning how to create the exhilarating experience of running a high performing organization. That's something that I'm deeply passionate about. And, one of the great things about humans is that we're uh, probably the most powerful tool in the world when we're all aligned and heading in the same direction. What is also true about humans is we are the most destructive tool in the world when we're all going in different directions. So that led me into the path, though, of falling in love with the concepts of business and how do you build a high performing organization.
I was in a conversation earlier this week with a very good friend of mine, and I made the comment to her that um, every one of us on this planet is simply an idea that is looking to manifest itself as fully as we possibly can. Now, we
Yes,
started out as an idea in mom and dad's mind, yeah, but and then we popped out, and here's the kernel of that idea. This is true of an organization as well. It's germinated in somebody's mind. The
yes,
thought comes in, what could it be? The tournament, that you're describing, you've got now an idea. As you said, it's humbling. Well, it's kind of like, okay, this is what it is. Now what?
hmm
Now what? Where do we go from here? And I love the way that you described, and you took this out of the coach's hands in the way that you described this. But you said, we started looking at, how do we design an offensive system that works for us? How do we design a defensive system that works for us using the parts of who we are? Yeah, and
exactly.
leveraging them. So what you're really describing there is the value of paying attention to diversity. Yeah, finding ways to
Yeah,
include people, and in that first tournament, there's kind of a level set that goes on here. So we got now some equity. We all know where we stand. So how do we work with this? And I mention this not to be politically incorrect or politically correct, but there's a value in being able to leverage people's innate talents, the idea of who they are, giving it breath to breathe, to actually come to life. You sent me a white paper that you had written
Mhm.
some time ago, and I want to talk about that a little bit because we're really looking, and you really described in there, um, kind of the missing. Yeah, there's a disconnect between charity and social impact, social enterprise. And I know for my organization, one of the social enterprise plays that we engage with is with the Unstoppable Foundation. I mean, we give 20% right off the top of gross, to the foundation on an ongoing basis. That's just because there's impact there. Um,
Yes.
so rather than me butchering a description of the paper, why don't you just back us into what it was that caught your attention, and then how you kind of unbundled that topic?
Yeah. For the last year and a half, I've been interviewing business leaders of purpose-driven businesses and social enterprises. And it's been a really fascinating journey. In fact, I've talked to over 200 social entrepreneurs and leaders in these spaces in this time period. Um, Now, what has been clear in that process is that, especially in the sector of social enterprise, organizations are very much struggling in their ability to successfully integrate impact and still build a effective and growing business. And I would actually argue that this article came from the point of I'm deeply concerned about the sector of social enterprise. I
Mm-hmm.
think that there are some very significant headwinds in that space. And you almost, when you think about social enterprise, you actually have to go back to the founding of why social enterprise exists. And it actually starts with understanding the limitations of charities. So, charity is a very powerful structure, but there are some key flaws that led to this idea of could we create social enterprise? And those key flaws are largely around charity's value chain, which is the people who give them money is not who they serve,
Right.
right? So as a charity, you're in the market serving beneficiaries, people who need support, often who don't have access to support, and you're in that space, filling that void. Um, and the nature of often supporting individuals in this space is they can't afford the services that they're receiving. So you then go out and ask donors to provide you money. But the reality of this, of what this creates, is that charities actually end up acting a lot like chameleons because the people who are providing funding, especially as it gets larger and larger, are putting constructs around that funding. So if we're going to give $1 million grant out, what are we going to give it out for? And so you
Mm-hmm.
might have a group say, well, we're going to give it out to organizations working with women of color on um, closing the wealth gap, the racial wealth gap, let's say. And that becomes a bucket. And then on the other side, if you're a charity and you work with people of color, and one of many pillars that you do is in wealth generation, then you start to write grants that are trying to redesign yourself in order to access that money.
Mm-hmm.
And the result of this is that it's a very difficult structure to scale because you have lots of different groups who are giving you money, which is causing you to constantly shift and change who you are in order to receive those funds. And so the impetus of social enterprise really came around this concept of could we create a structure that leverages business, which includes access to capital, the ability to scale, strong serving of customer, key elements of this that potentially could allow us to have an enterprise that could scale and really address world issues. And so there were big hopes put behind social enterprise.
Yeah.
Um, but the reality of what we're seeing in the sector is a lot different. In fact, a lot of social enterprises uh, need grants to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be a little provocative to say this, but if you need grants to survive, I hate to tell you, you're not a social enterprise. You're not a business. You're really acting like a charity.
Charity.
Yeah. Um, and that's a difficult element of it. And, so you start to actually look at some of uh, the interesting numbers that are out there. There was one group in particular in Canada called Bisocial, and they did an excellent survey where they reached out to 132 different social enterprises and they asked them different questions. But one of the key questions that they asked them was about their profitability level. And what we saw from that study is that 89% of social enterprises listed themselves as marginally profitable, break even, losing a little bit of money, or losing a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
There was only 11% of social enterprises that articulated themselves as being profitable. And to me, that put up a big
Yeah.
flag. And
Yeah.
part of the reason why it put up a flag for me is that, uh, another way of saying this is only 11% of those social enterprises would be able to get access to a bank loan
Right.
to support their growth, which is a very concerning thought. Never mind, probably 11% who would also qualify to be able to get funding from an investor, which we know are really important elements to support growth of organizations. Yeah. And so, anyways, the nature of what we're seeing essentially in social enterprises. So, if you were to look at, well, what else does this mean? Uh, well, by nature, they're very small geographically in who they serve. They're either, I believe the number is 63% serve a local community or a city.
Mm-hmm.
That's the length of their reach. And I believe 43% of the social enterprises surveyed had less than 20 employees. So they're small in scale.
Yeah. So when we're looking at the the nature of impact, what I'm hearing in this, and this is actually what I when I was reading the paper, um, many of these social enterprises actually they're founded on an idea. Yeah, they're
Mm-hmm.
founded on an idea, an altruistic idea generally, in some
Yeah,
way, shape, or form. But then they don't necessarily run. They're not run as a business.
correct.
They're run
Yes.
as a charity.
Yes.
And yeah, when we look at it through the lens of mindset structures, yeah, and we've run into this a lot. Yeah, charities, typically don't pay their people well, because we're looking at just kind of the charity navigator metrics and that sort of thing. Where does the money go? If the money's
Yes.
all going to the clients, there's nothing left for the infrastructure that allows for that to be regenerated. So, it's basically a death spiral for the organization.
It's very tough if you've ever worked in a break-even business.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very difficult disposition to be in and to try to figure your route out of. And the common things that you would hear, as I've spoken to so many people who've been working in social enterprises, they commonly say we're under-resourced,
Yep.
which means that their staff are stretched, everybody's over capacity, that they're grant dependent to survive. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not sustainable funding, and they're always questioning whether or not they're going to receive those grants to kind of support the bottom line. And the third is that they really struggle to figure out ways to scale.
Yeah. And
Um, and
that last piece is
yeah,
yeah,
and what's interesting, and you would know this from your work with charities, those are also common themes of what you would hear within charities.
exactly. Exactly. So what's the antidote? What's the antidote? How do we actually address this in a holistic way without throwing the
Yeah,
baby out with the bath?
yes. So listen, there are a series of things to think about. So the first is that the uh, impact side and the mission or the
Mm-hmm.
vision is so important, and that founding story is so important for an organization, and they should not lose sight of that.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, that is the heart of the organization. But as somebody who has run a social enterprise, you also have to understand that the finances and profit is the lifeline. It is the blood pumping through the body.
Mm-hmm.
And so you, of course, need the heart, and you don't want to remove that, but you have to find this place for profit. And so, there's really three things that I often see as a difference between really strong social enterprises doing well and ones that are struggling. And I would also extend this into purpose-driven businesses as well. So the first is running a break-even business is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
These organizations need to target somewhere in the range of probably 12 to 20% profitability. That
Yep.
is a healthy number to go after. And why? Because it removes that feeling of people feeling stretched and overworked. It gives you room in contracts that when you get it wrong with a customer, you actually have the financial space to course correct and fix it and get it right.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, if I need to put a little more money behind this, I can do that. It gives space for innovation. Having
Huge.
some profit allows you to focus on developing new ways to do things. Um, and then, of course, you reach that profitability level and it opens the doors to bank loans and investors. And I had this opportunity to speak with, have this banker speak at an accelerator program that we run for the YWCA in Chicago. And he came up and said something that I thought was so important to hear, because a common thing that we hear from businesses that are break even is like, if I can just get a bank loan, I can, or if I could just get some money, I could get out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up and said, I just want to be clear, we're not in the business of saving dying companies. We provide money to businesses that have been able to show historical profits that allow us to know with confidence that we will be paid back on this loan. Those are the organizations who receive money from us.
Yeah.
And so that was a really important mindset. So, that's really the first area.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to your opening conversation about that basketball tournament. Yeah, as a bank, we are not in the business of funding dying businesses.
Yeah.
That's just not what we do. But so, as a wake up call, as I'm listening in that audience and I'm running a social enterprise, and I'm kind of looking at, okay, what do we do here? I hear that and I kind of go, okay, there's nothing like hitting rock bottom, because the foundation of rock bottom is pretty solid. Once I can begin to accept it, okay, this is factually what's going on here. I'm never going to get that loan until we can begin to look like this.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that
And there's
begins to
something
inform.
so freeing when you start to run an organization that has profit, because you
Yeah,
actually have the ability to play with ideas, do the things that you want to do, take care of your employees, invest in areas of the organization that you think are going to create returns. Like it's like taking shackles off. You feel
yeah.
so healthy when you're doing it.
So uh, the soul of the business, whether it's a for-profit or a not-for-profit enterprise, the soul of any organization, if we can begin to articulate that true to it as a true north kind of
Yes,
orienter, by definition, that involves me recognizing it needs life in order to be viable.
yes,
And if that penny drops, now I'm organizing my business to be sure that that dream continues to have life.
yes,
And
yes.
and as an enterprise, I need to have the fuel. Yeah, money. Yeah, money is simply energy that is looking to be transformed into a useful form. Yeah,
I love that you said that. I love that you said that, because coming from the social enterprise world and the purpose-driven business world, there are many of us in that space who think of profit as greed and that
yeah,
it is a bad thing. And uh, we have to remember that generating wealth for ourselves, for our employees, is a really important thing. And what you can do with that wealth, whether it stays with you or with the company, is a powerful and freeing thing that
absolutely.
progresses us to achieve some of the things that we want to achieve in the world.
Yeah.
Um, so that was the first common mistake in area that I see well-run, purpose-driven organizations take on. The second one, which is really interesting, is the importance of serving the customer's needs before you speak about
Mm-hmm.
your impact.
Oh,
And
let's unbundle that. I came across that, and I actually highlighted that area in the paper. It's,
yeah,
it's
and
good.
it's a really fascinating because I've gone through it myself, and it's really interesting the path in which you go on that sometimes causes the mistakes in this area. So, um, what do I mean by that? Is it's important. The fact that you're creating impact in the world is important, but you have to understand what the product or service is that you're putting in market, and that product and service has to check off the right boxes first in the decision making criteria of the customer before you can actually talk about impact and have impact help be a deciding factor in why they would go with you. And
Yeah.
I'll use an example because I stumbled through this myself. Back when I was with Me to we had launched a line of coffee called This Coffee Changes the World. So like
Yep.
hit you over the head with the impact measurement, or not measurement, but the impact
Promise.
messaging.
Yeah.
And so we took that to market. And after about 6 months in market, we went back and we did research, customer research. And we found when we looked at the consideration set, we had the most interesting finding going through it. We had all come from being very impact focused. And part of the reason why this messaging made sense to us was that we started off by speaking to people directly, founders, very senior people in the organization, speaking to somebody face to face, talking to them at events and activities, telling them about the mission of the organization and what we stand for. When you're in that framework, you can
Mm.
be very convincing. Okay. But when your product is in line at a grocery store, along with 100 other products, and you're not there to sell it to them, you this decision making criteria changes quite significantly. And so what we saw in the research is that being impact driven, or the impact messaging, fell between 5 and 8 on the decision making criteria. So the question goes, well, what comes first? What comes above it? And in the coffee space, I'm going to say these to you, and you're going to be like, well, of course. But what went first was number one, that the roast was the roast that they were looking for. So like dark, medium, blonde.
Yep.
Coffee was from a high quality coffee brand, that it was priced low. Customers all want low price. That the coffee is a well-known brand. Then came into place any certifications like fair trade or impact messaging. Then there was the format, like K cups or not, and then whether or not it came from a socially conscious brand. And so it was really interesting to look at this because, of course, it makes sense that you need to talk about those things first. You need to make sure that you've got the right blend, you've got the right price. Now, in some cases, if you're starting off brand, you might not be a well-known brand in coffee. So how do you convince them that you are a quality brand? Do
Mm-hmm.
you need awards? Do you need a celebrity endorsement? What are the things that are going to encourage them to understand that you're quality? And you have to work down through that list before you're leading with the messaging of impact.
That's yeah. So yeah, in the leadership work I do, one of the primary drivers of effectiveness from a leadership perspective is knowing what the contextual frame is in which you're actually trying to message. Yeah, because
Mm,
the context provides the meaning. I mean, you can have all the data in the world, but contextually, yeah, it's going to, the context is going to influence the listening, and the listening is what people pay attention to. It's kind
yes,
of, what am I hearing here? That gets run through this contextual frame. So on the supermarket, that's a context. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. If I'm at a conference talking to somebody one-on-one who happens to be a donor that knows us really well, that's a different kind of a context. They're going to be far more receptive to a certain kind of messaging than a consumer will be. I mean,
yes,
so, but I'm emphasizing this. It's kind of like, well, yeah, of course. But the point here has to do with folks that are leading social responsibility organization or socially responsible organizations need to have that kind of thinking going on. oftentimes it's not the lack of strategy, it's not the lack of well executed tactics, it's the lack of effective thinking that drives success or drives failure. We've got to be
Yes.
able to think differently before we get to execution.
Yes. And if you think about why somebody would work for a purpose-driven organization, it's often so ingrained with our values. It's the thing that we're most passionate about
Yeah,
when we show up to work every day. So what is the thing that we want to talk about when we're talking to a potential customer? Well, the thing that we're most
what I'm
passionate about,
passionate about.
right? And so it makes sense in your own mind, hierarchy wise, why you would do that. But you also need to take into account how your product is being compared against others when a
Absolutely.
customer is standing in line, and start to think about, well, what boxes do I need to check off? And it's not that the impact is not important. It's actually incredibly important. And it can be one of the biggest deciding factors as to why somebody chooses your product over another. But if you don't check the other boxes, then you're not going to get there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, we had a chance to work with this really amazing brand called High Bar, and they have developed essentially shampoo without plastic packaging, so it's like a bar shampoo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so they commonly were talking about how this shampoo is made without the use of any plastics. Like, it's very important. But when you speak to them and ask them about what was the biggest objection that women had about using their product, it was whether or not the product would make their hair look good as they head out on a Friday night,
Right.
which makes sense, right? Because they're not used to the format of a shampoo bar. And so they were reworking their messaging and thinking about, well, we need to answer that question first, because we're not going to get a yes on selling this product unless they understand that this is salon grade, really high quality shampoo.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, context. I run it through
Yes.
Friday night hair.
Yeah.
No, yeah, and what's fascinating about that is the beauty products industry is these, and this is a fascinating statistic. It is the single most polluting industry on the planet,
Wow.
and
Wow. I didn't
yeah,
know that.
yeah. Very seldom are these bottles recycled, or I mean, it's fascinating the amount of degradation, climate degradation that goes on in the beauty industry. Yeah,
Yeah.
you talk about an oxymoron.
Yes. Yeah. So true. So true. And then listen, the final common
Yeah.
mistake that we see, or I should say, on this in this particular case, the very successful purpose-driven organizations and social enterprises, what we've seen is that they do a great job of actually integrating the impact into their value chain. And
Hmm.
what I mean by value chain is all the things that you use to make your product or service. Um, and what we found was, as we spoke to all of these individuals, is the reason why that is most effective is because it allows the organization to have a singular focus internally, which is we need to service our customer. And the better we service our customer, the more impact we make. And I'll give you an example. There's this brilliant company called Someone Somewhere. It's a social enterprise based out of Mexico. And they essentially have three impacts. So they create textile goods. And those three impacts are that they take uh, fabric that has already been in the market and they recycle it down to thread. Their second impact is that they then send that thread to artisans. And in Mexico, artisans are renowned for making beautiful fabrics. And so they integrate the different colors and the different formats and turn it back into fabric, and they're paid a fair wage. So that is the second impact. And then the third impact is it goes to their factory, where textile workers, so factory workers, are
Hmm.
known for being significantly underpaid in Mexico, and they're paying them a fair wage. And then they take those fabrics and produce products. And over a 4-year period, they grew over 7 times, 7x. And when I spoke to the CEO about, you know, how has he been able to achieve this? He spoke about how having his impact ingrained so closely in the value chain allowed them to just have a single conversation internally. There was never a debate of, do we service our customer or do we focus on our impact? It was just, we service our customer, and the better job that we do that, the more impact that we have.
Hmm.
And we found that to be common when we looked across the most successful organizations that are creating impact out there, is that single focus.
I think that's an extraordinarily adept way of describing how you stay connected to the soul of the enterprise.
Yes.
Yeah. You actually integrate everything into the value chain itself.
Yeah.
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 So it's not it's not an afterthought. Oh, we forgot to, we need to. No, it's already built in. It's already built in.
Yeah.
Russ, where
So
can people
true.
find out more about what you're up to with Mighty Hum? I've
I would love
mentioned,
for them.
yeah.
Yeah. Come to mightyhum.com, but also check out our LinkedIn page. So if you just search Mighty Hum, you'll find it on LinkedIn. We would love to have people there and get a chance to see the various updates of the various things that we're working on. And I'll just throw it there. I've done this research because I'm so passionate about helping purpose-driven businesses succeed. And I'm a huge champion for social enterprise and purpose-driven businesses, and would love to share any findings or any questions that people have. Please reach out. I would love to be able to help any of you along in your journey.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Folks, mightyhum.com. And that's one M, Mighty Hum with one M, not two M's, mightyhum.com. Russell McLeod's been my guest today. Russ, thank you so much. I could continue this conversation for a long, long time. Probably going to have you back on as a guest again here down the road, if you're open to it.
Thank you, Blaine. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, completely. Folks, you've been listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. As always, in your life, nature is the greatest teacher that you will ever find. So if you pay attention to it, you notice that everything in nature in some way, shape, or form serves as a center of distribution. There is nothing in nature that is solely set up to be a center of accumulation. So as you live your life, find a way to be a center of distribution. Don't be too concerned with accumulating things. Give stuff away. A smile, a hug, give a big tip. Tip the bill. You'll delight your waiter, I promise you. And until next time, take care and have a great rest of your week. This episode is sponsored by The Power of You, a leadership resource for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and anyone intent on developing their leadership impact and supercharging their career. For more information, check the podcast webpage or show notes. Hi, I'd like to ask you to do something for me if you wouldn't mind. If you like this episode, I'd like you to not only subscribe on your favorite site, but I'd also like you to give a rating. Ideally, a 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. But I think more importantly also would be just some comments. That helps with the algorithm and it helps build the audience with this. And more than anything else, if you could invite somebody else to listen, just share this episode with a friend, with a colleague. And I'd like to see how we can grow the soul of business. I think it makes a difference. Thanks.